Welcome to the Resilient Training Lab podcast.
What's going on, guys? We're back with another episode of the Resilient Training Lab podcast. We got an exciting week going on so far. Gyms have been back open, so it's been really good to be training people in person again. I think that's where we feel like we thrive.
Yeah, crazy how much you missed it and didn't even realize until you got back to the gym and it was like, oh man, this is where I need to be.
It's been great. Everybody's happy, excited to be there. Nobody's too concerned about what they're doing, just happy to see familiar faces.
Yeah, everybody's been super respectful and compliant to the new rules and really been going out of their way to make sure everyone feels safe and comfortable. And it's been great to see kind of everybody rally around and do what they can to make the experience as good as possible for anybody that comes into the gym.
I think everybody's thrilled, unless they own stock in Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 3 months without any heavy lifting will definitely mess with you.
So, topic for today, guys, we're going to be talking about reasons why you might not be seeing progress. And so a lot of times people get all gung-ho about the gym and they're fired up and they have a really good experience the first however long, month, 2 months, 3 months, and then they kind of fizzle out. So we're going to try and dive into some reasons why that might be. Before we do that, though, when it comes to success during the first few months, I think a lot of people do see a lot of changes. And so do you attribute that to anything in particular, Paul, when people, start at the gym and the first 60 to 90 days go really well?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, you can really do anything and see progress, like especially if you weren't doing anything before. So, taking that step from doing absolutely nothing, maybe just like walking, or even some people don't even get that many steps in, and then they get to the gym and they start working out in any fashion, they're going to see progress because that step from zero to something is going to, be significant. The problem is, unless we have, these things that we're going to be talking about in place, those like newbie gains when you first come into the gym will slowly fade as your body kind of adapts to that new stress that you're putting on it.
Yeah, I always like to look at it as a comparison. So how much is what their new habit is different from their old habit?
I mean, like you're going to see some like neural adaptations in that first 60 to 90 days as your like nervous system gets used to kind of producing force and the workouts you're doing. But to actually drive adaptation in your body, you need to put enough stress on it that it needs to adapt. Our bodies are they're lazy, I guess is the right way to say it, is they want to kind of stay the same and not have to do the extra work. And unless you force it to, it's not going to adapt.
Do you think that people are sold this false narrative that it's possible to get all of the results they want and still remain comfortable and not have to push themselves hard, whether it's, the media peddling supplements or, whatever it is?
Well, yeah. And I think that's what people want, right? So it's easier to sell that. It's much harder to convince someone that, they need to get uncomfortable on a regular basis than the opposite. And I think, people are always looking for that quick fix, and that's just human nature. We want to get things done with as little work as possible. And unfortunately, this isn't an area that you can do that. You get what you put into it. So if you're not putting in the work, you're not going to see the results.
Yeah. And it's something it's never easy. The only thing that's going to change is you're going to be stronger. So you just get used to making yourself uncomfortable and you get used to the amount of work that you have to put in. And like an RP 8 or 9 is always going to feel pretty crummy. It's not going to feel any less crummy just because you're stronger. There's just going to be more weight on the bar.
Yeah. If anything, as you get stronger, you have to do more intensity, more volume, and get even more uncomfortable. So,
So if we were to create a pyramid, I know we talked about consistency, effort, and recovery. What would you put on the bottom?
Well, consistency for sure. Nothing matters if you're not getting to the gym on a regular basis. There's some exercise guidelines out there for a recommended amount of exercise, and I drop this stat all the time, but only 18.6% of Americans meet those exercise guidelines, and those are the minimum amount of exercise recommended. So if only 18.6% of Americans are reaching the minimum amount of exercise, we've got some hefty work ahead of us, and getting people to just be consistent with their workouts is going to be by far the most important aspect of anything we talk about. And there's so many factors that play a role in that. And a lot of the stuff we talk about, later in this podcast will kind of feed that consistency.
I think a lot of people also consider activities to be exercise when you and I might not define them as such.
Yeah, we just had this conversation the other day with one of our interns. And yeah, like people think, well, there's a lot of things that are sold as exercise, and not all of them are intense enough to drive adaptation and force change in our bodies. And that's not to say that they're useless. They have, all these different activities have their benefits, but you can't say they count towards exercise. Stuff like yoga and Tai Chi are fantastic for stress relief and mindfulness and relaxation, but they're not intense enough to call exercise. And, you see people taking these types of like low intensity classes and trying to count that as their exercise. And while these may be activities that you enjoy and they bring value to your life, and you should by all means keep doing them, you need to supplement them with actual, lifting weights and conditioning type exercises, because those guidelines we were talking about say that we need to be resistance training at least twice a week, and we need to be doing cardiovascular activity about 3 times a week for like 30 to 60 minutes. I think it's, I want to say 180 minutes total in the week. So
I've seen up to 300 if it's moderate intensity, and then 75 to 150 if it's intense activity.
Yeah, and I think we need to kind of define those terms with this question, Bay, is like, what is intense exercise and what is moderate intensity exercise? And you can look at this in a few different ways. From a lifting standpoint, in my head, if you're not hitting up RPE 7s, 8s, and 9s, you're not in that high intensity zone. And cardiovascular wise, you're going to be looking at either RPE or kind of your heart rate. And if you're not regularly, like consistently for your whole workout above like 60 to 70% of your max heart rate, or working in that like 6 to 7 RPE range, you're not going to get too much out of the cardiovascular work either. And then I think it's important to bring up, walking. There's a lot of people will try and say, walking's my low intensity or moderate intensity cardiovascular work. And while that might be the case when you first start and you're not in the best cardiovascular shape, that's quickly gonna adapt to that. And walking is just, it's something you should just do. Like it's part of being a human. Like you can't say, oh, I walked today, that's my exercise. You should just be walking. It's part of life.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to take it for granted, but absolutely, it's just part of being human, is getting those steps in. I know you brought up that we had that conversation with one of our interns, but I did an intake with a new client the other day, and she also brought it up in relation to her parents, because we were talking about walking, and I had said, we want to get our steps in, and it's a really good way to keep our need up. And she was like, I wish you could tell that to my parents. And I was like, yeah, I think that's a great point, because if we can get somebody lifting weights, it's going to do so much more for their bones and their independence. And the example that I used was, if you happen to fall and you have to catch yourself and all you do is walk, you've never strengthened the muscles or the bones in your upper body. So the likelihood of experiencing an injury is going to be higher. So if we just look at weight training as a way to specifically target any particular area of our body that could use some more strength or strengthening our bones or whatever the goal is, it's going to be the most specific activity that we could do.
Yeah, I think that's another big point you kind of brought up there was with the older clients and older population, lifting weights has kind of almost been like demonized and like deemed dangerous, and that these older people are like fragile or something. And they're, I don't know, like once you hit 50, something magically changes and you can no longer do intense exercise and you should stick to walking and gardening and yoga. Like, but that's just so false. You can't judge someone by their age. And that's something we're, really about here at Resilient is looking at the person in front of us and, assessing them where they currently are and finding out what they need. And age and sex and Yeah, age and sex don't really play a role in that. You'll see we have a 72-year-old client who will run half of our other clients under the table coming to working out. She's been working out her whole life and she's a badass. Like if she came into another trainer and she saw her with her 1960s ace bandaged knee sleeves and her slight limp, they'd be like, oh, this lady's not going to be able to do anything. But then you get a dumbbell in her hands and she's banging out squats and push-ups and, working out 4 hours a week. And if she came to another gym, and she might not have gotten that experience because people would have been quickly to judge her on her age, and age has nothing to do with ability. Like I said, there's plenty of 70-plussers that are way stronger than 20-year-olds because they've been crushing it their whole lives.
Not only is she badass in what she does, I'm sure you saw, but she was working out at home the other day and one of the exercises needed to be changed, and she just modified it herself to a great alternative, and she just sent an email to let us know. So not only is she strong, but she cares enough about what she's doing to make the modifications that she needs to instead of just skipping it.
Yeah, and that's, comes down to being consistent over the long term, right? She's learned how to be self-efficient, and she's learned how to modify things to make sure that she can keep doing them based on her limitations. And that comes with consistency. When you're doing this for a long time over a consistent period, you start to learn things about yourself better than any coach could ever learn, because, it's your body and you know your body the best. And, being able to have those skills to continue to train despite whatever else is going on in your life is going to be something that comes with consistency and then helps drive further consistency.
In the past, have you ever worked with a client who maybe came in with the expectation that you're the trainer, you're going to run the show, and they don't have to be an active participant in what they're doing, and they can just turn their brain off while they're in the gym?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people look for that too, is, they want to be able to come in and just not think about anything. And, at first that might be all right, but as a coach, it's our job to drive that self-efficacy and get people more comfortable with thinking about their bodies and thinking about their training. And, a lot of that's just because they're new and they don't really know what to do. And it's very, very, very overwhelming. And maybe as a coach, you're there to kind of hold their hand at the beginning and really show them the way. But you want to slowly increase the space you give them and make them more autonomous and make them more self-efficient, because in the long run, that is what's going to drive consistency for a lifetime. And we're looking to make this a lifetime habit. Working out isn't something you just do to hit a certain goal or to lose a certain amount of weight. It's something that you should be doing your whole life. And it's a habit that we need to create. And this corona pandemic is a perfect example of why we need and why we want our clients to get involved in the process and learn and make a commitment to their progress, because, gyms shut down for 3 months. You don't have your coach anymore. Like, what are you going to do? Sit at home and do nothing, or take the knowledge that you've gained training with your coach and be able to continue to work out in some manner so that you can continue to make progress, or at least maintain the progress you made. So when you get back to the gym, you can kick some ass.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it's huge to highlight that, I brought up this pyramid, and you mentioned consistency being on the bottom when it comes to making progress. But, there's only 3 topics that we're really looking to cover today: consistency, effort, and recovery. And we could go so deep into the rabbit hole on any one of those that we could turn this into, a 5-hour episode. So, trying to stay on topic is important. But when it comes to increasing our consistency, that independence is exactly like that. That's a great tool to help somebody continue to train. And so when Paul brings up that, we're looking to teach people, make them active participants in their exercise programs so that when you don't have a coach next to you, you're still able to train hard. The most successful clients that we see are the ones who really take an interest in learning and executing and understanding why they're doing what they're doing, so that they aren't ever left feeling stuck or unsure of what to do. Or if they are, they have a pretty good educated guess as to, how they should navigate until they can ask a coach.
Yeah. And, building that independence and self-efficacy, there's lots of research showing, that's one of the main drivers of consistency. And I think all too often coaches are almost scared to give that to their clients. They want to create some dependence so that their clients, I don't know, like don't leave or whatever reason they have. And I think, that's a big problem in the fitness industry is trainers trying to make their clients dependent on them. And when the trainer's not there and they can't work out, then you're doing them a disservice. So as trainers, we need to give people the tools to make this a lifetime habit and to be able to do it without us. And believe it or not, in the long run, those clients stay around longer because you've helped change their life and you helped empower them to be the people they want to be. And they'll be forever grateful for that. So this whole like making clients dependent on you is just, I don't know, it's ass backwards in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's just perfectly clear by the way that everything at Resilient Training Lab is structured and operates. So I think that's a really good spot to wrap up, sort of talking about consistency. And when we talked about somebody making progress the first 60 to 90 days, yeah, consistency is huge. You got to show up, you got to do the work. But at some point, you start to level off and you're not making progress. And then we got to start to take a look at how much effort are you actually putting into your sessions. And we sort of hinted at this earlier when we said it's, hard to sell this idea that you have to get uncomfortable and you have to be pushing yourself in your sessions to make progress. But it's an absolute reality when it comes to people who are going to train and look for more than, 3 months worth of progress.
For sure. Being consistent is going to get you a long way, but eventually you need to do more than that. And, that brings us to the next part of our pyramid, right? After consistency, the next part will be effort. And if you're not putting in the effort, we kind of touched on this a little bit with the high intensity and moderate intensity, is you need to be getting uncomfortable in order to drive adaptation. Your body's not going to adapt if it doesn't feel the need to. You need to put enough stress on it so your body's like, oh man, I wasn't ready for that. I need to get bigger, faster, stronger, whatever it is to be able to handle that stressor next time it comes around. So if we're not putting in that effort, then our bodies are just going to become adapted to that low level of effort and stop seeing progress. So I think this is where a lot of people kind of get trapped. This is that first trap. They're like, oh man, I'm really consistent. I'm doing these workouts. And sometimes they'll be like, oh, these workouts are killing me. They feel really hard. And there's a difference between a hard workout and an intense workout. And there's a difference between a hard workout and putting in effort. You can do a workout and be drenched in sweat laying on the ground afterward. But during that workout, you didn't really do anything intense. You might have just strung together a bunch of low intensity exercises and made yourself feel like crap. But that's not kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about effort. Effort's different in different realms. When you're looking at conditioning, there's a certain type of effort. When you're looking at strength, there's a certain type of effort. And in order to build strength, we need to be pushing our force capabilities. So we need to be pushing as much weight as possible and bringing ourselves close to failure, and then giving ourselves enough rest to repeat that effort at the same intensity. And then in terms of conditioning, that might be more of a dead feeling at the end where you're keeping your heart rate up for a long time. But I think it's important to differentiate between conditioning type workout and a strength type workout, which are both very important in making progress.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be able to force your body to work in a variety of ways. And so regardless of the activity, I think it's easy to conceptualize that if you can push yourself really hard for a minute, you can push yourself really hard for 30 seconds, and you can push yourself really hard for 5 seconds. And we should be capable and experienced in all of those different areas because they're all going to be relevant at some point or another in our everyday life. So your training should absolutely reflect that.
Yeah. And new people, with that analogy, I think when people start working out, it's a lot easier to give the effort in longer time periods, right? Because it doesn't have to be as intense for you to be tired or fatigued at the end, right? If you're doing 30 minutes, you can be, especially if you're not in great shape, you can be doing pretty low intense exercises and feel fatigued at the end. And that's great for that time period, which is going to probably be a little more conditioning based. But then you mentioned that 5-second time period. Like, people really struggle in creating effort and intensity in 5 seconds, especially when they first start working out. And that's because, it's not something you do very regularly in life, and it's something that you have to train. And if you're not doing things, like a heavy squat single that takes 3 to 5 seconds, you're not going to learn how to put all your effort into what you're doing at one time. And, this comes back to power training, being able to produce force quickly and all at once, and how that's the first things we kind of lose as we start to age, because it's not something you do regularly. And it's something that you need to do in the gym because, as we talked about in past podcasts, power is still a very important quality even as you age, and arguably even more so as you age.
I think a lot of times too, people underestimate just how much they're going to like trying something different. A lot of people have experienced success when they work out in one way, and this kind of creates the mindset that they need to go back to that way if they want to see those results again. So if they lost 10 pounds and they were doing X, now they want to lose 10 pounds again. So they're going to go back to doing X, even though that might not necessarily have been why they lost weight. And I bring this up just because I think a lot of people find that they actually really enjoy pushing themselves for shorter amounts of time in the gym. It's not something that they're used to, but they love seeing that they can move an extra, 5 to 10 pounds in a heavy single in their favorite lift every, couple months. And it really sort of increases their desire to train and motivation to train and willingness to push themselves because they have those quantifiable results.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of people are scared of just new things in general. And the cool thing about training and working out is that, at first it might not be fun for you, or maybe you find a certain way of working out that you really enjoy. And, that excitement lasts for a while. But if you're not seeing progress, that excitement will quickly die off. And having sources of objective measures that you can quantifiably see progress in is going to be really the driver of long-term consistency. And that comes with effort. So as you can see, all these topics we're going to talk about today are very intertwined. Being able to put in the effort to see progress is going to drive consistency. So consistency is at the bottom of the period for that very reason. But these things that we're going to talk about above consistency are going to help drive even more consistency. And when it comes to effort in kind of like, especially strength related effort, because when it comes to effort in general, it comes with that feeling of being uncomfortable, and people avoid feeling uncomfortable at all cost. But one of our big goals is to make people more comfortable with the uncomfortable, and that carries outside of the gym too. That allows people to, maybe face some difficult situations that they would have avoided in the past because, they're comfortable with being uncomfortable, and they know, what the benefits of getting uncomfortable are. And that, again, is a life lesson more than a lifting lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. It's applicable anywhere, whether, it's your school, career, kids, family, whatever. It's, absolutely the willingness to accept that like the process is what's important to embrace, and the process is always going to be uncomfortable, because if you're pushing yourself to grow, it's like it wouldn't be easy, or everybody would be able to do it. And so the people that we find to be really successful in the gym, or even just in any walk of life, are the ones who are really willing to embrace the process and embrace that it sucks, and understand that like at times it's supposed to suck.
Yeah. And I know it's cliche, but you hear it all the time. Nothing in life worth getting. Well, I messed it up.
Not cliche enough.
Yeah, nothing in life worth getting is got easy or something along those lines. I definitely messed it up. But if
I don't
it's
think
easy,
anybody listens to us for pristine.
But if it's easy, it's probably not going to be that valuable. And again, that's everything in life. If something is, the more effort you put into something, the more rewarding it's going to be. And I think people realize that when it comes to other aspects of life, but they don't want to admit that when it comes to training. And I use the analogy of, saving money or investing as a good comparison here is, people really understand that they need to put money away on a regular basis consistently. They need to make cuts in their lifestyle to be able to, live within their means. And people understand that putting money away is a lifetime thing. If you want, to retire, you need to start young and put money away consistently and, put the effort in to keep that going. And it's the same thing with training. You need to put those deposits in on a regular basis, or else you're going to have no savings.
You said something to me the other week, and I thought it was phenomenal. I had never heard it before, but you had told me that, muscle's rented. It's not bought. It's, you don't have it forever. And this kind of ties back to when you were talking about our bodies wanting to kind of remain the same, and it's hard to push adaptation. Like, muscle is a very metabolically expensive tissue to have. It's very costly. And so we have to constantly provide the resources and the stimulus in order to have it and keep it.
Yeah, our bodies are looking to use as little energy as possible and be as efficient as possible. And like you said, muscle is metabolically expensive. And that doesn't mean that muscle is a bad thing to have. Quite the contrary. There's lots of research showing increased lean body mass decreases your all-cause mortality and has a host of other beneficial effects. But that muscle is rented. And if you're not paying your dues, it's going to go away. And I think a lot of people realize that this past 3 months, not being able to go out.
It goes away pretty damn quick too.
Which is why consistency is so damn important.
Yeah, it really is unfortunate that it's only rented, but keeps us, living with healthy habits for sure. So beyond consistency and effort, we put recovery at the top of the pyramid. And this is probably a little surprising for some of you listening, because we talk all the time about the importance of recovery, but Paul and I just kind of assume if you're working with us, you, for the most part, have consistency and effort down. And the reason that we put it at the top is that you don't need to recover from a stimulus that you're not providing your body. So you need consistency and effort in order to have the need for recovery. And so that's why we put it at the top.
Yeah, need to train hard enough to need recovery. If you're not training hard, there's nothing to recover from. So this stuff isn't super important because there's nothing to recover from. So if you're not putting in the effort and it's not consistent, and you're not your average session RPE should be about an 8. Like, if you're not averaging about an 8 out of 10 on all your workouts, then you probably don't need to worry about recovery. You need to worry about getting into the gym and busting your ass.
Yeah, I think it was like old bodybuilder Jay Cutler's like, you're not overtrained, you're under eating. And for the most part, people aren't really overtrained. That's a pretty difficult space to get to. Some people have, expressed to me that they're concerned about it in the past, and it just blew my mind. I'm like, wait a minute, like, you're worried about overtraining. You work out 3 times a week for 45 minutes. And it's not even in the cards for you right now.
Yeah, I think coaches, they like talking about outliers and extremes and those elite level athletes and stuff. And, overtraining, don't get me wrong, it's not fake. There is such thing as overtraining. You can overtrain. But most people, they're just not going to get there. The amount of uncomfortableness you need to get through to be overtrained is astonishing. And when we're talking overtraining, we're talking about like football players doing 2-a-days in the dead heat of the summer. And we're not talking about just your average Joe going to the gym 3 to 5 times a week for a couple hours. If you look at, some of these elite athletes and what they've accomplished, I mean, people run for days. They'll run literally for days, like 300 plus miles at a time. And if they're able to accomplish that without overtraining, I think, someone training for a marathon or a half marathon is pretty safe.
So you're telling me if I did a heavy squat on Monday and a heavy deadlift on Tuesday, my central nervous system isn't fried?
No.
That's a funny one to me. I hear that all the time. Like, oh, dude, my CNS is fried. I'm like, I don't think it is.
Yeah. You wouldn't be operating so well if it was.
So within recovery, we can branch off into several different aspects of it. I think people have maybe a flawed perception of recovery. I've heard in the past people say things like, I'm going to go for a recovery run. And no, that ain't it.
Yeah, I think this also gets kind of mixed up in the strength and conditioning world for a few reasons. People trying to sell their products. People like to create air quotes recovery products. And unfortunately, again, just like we talked about with consistency, there's no magic pill you can take to recover. There's no special product you can buy and rub on your body or roll over and recover. You need to give your body the energy and manage your stress and sleep and do those type of things to drive recovery, not more. You recover when you're resting. You don't recover when you're doing extra stuff. I think oftentimes people are always looking for things to add in. What can I add in to help my recovery? And usually it's more, what can we take away to help your recovery? What can you do less of to help your recovery? What can you do to put your body in a state where it's going to recover and it's set up to recover?
Yeah, backtracking a little bit, I think that recovery run myth kind of stems from people recognizing that when it comes to their training, like you should have training days that aren't quite as intense as your most intense days. Nobody can have that dial turned up to 10 every day of the week forever. It's just not possible. So it is important to vary your intensity when you're exercising, but what that isn't, it's not actually increasing your recovery. And so what Paul listed are the ways that we recover. We recover by sleeping. We need to make sure we're managing our stress. We need to eat well and give our body the nutrients it needs in order to recover. And we need to just manage fatigue in the long term. So that kind of gets back to the, not always going to have your dial turned up to 10.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, exactly. Having a good workout program with high intensity days and lower intensity days is, it's the next thing we're going to talk about is the very tip of the pyramid. But again, it's just the tip of the pyramid. So you can look at, there's plenty of models out there. I think Charlie Francis really is the one who made this big with his high-low type training model where you do a high intensity type day one day and the next day you come in and do a low intensity day. And I think that is part of the, recovery run conversation is people are like, oh, we're doing high and low intensity days. So that's our recovery day. And not exactly, that day is still going to be designed to push adaptation, but it might be something that requires lower intensity exercise. For example, you do a heavy strength day one day and the next day you might come in and do a lower intensity aerobic conditioning day, but we're still focusing on different energy systems and different trainable qualities and looking to push adaptation in those trainable qualities. Even though we're calling them low intensity days, they're just low intensity in comparison to the higher intensity days. That doesn't make them recovery. It's still work that you have to do, and your body still expends energy doing it. And anything you expend energy doing is not recovery. And I think some people get this idea where recovery happens in a vacuum, where you do a training session and you place stress on your body and then you recover from said training session. But really, stress and recovery are happening all the time, back and forth, no matter what. You're always placing stresses on your body and you're always trying to recover from those stresses, and being able to kind of manage that and keep yourself on, the positive side there is super important.
Yeah. And This is tangentially related, but I saw yesterday Alan Argon. He's a nutrition PhD and part of the, I guess I would say one of the best just overall nutrition guys out there, or dietitians. Is he a dietitian? I don't want to misspeak.
I don't know. I just know he does a lot of research around nutrition, and he's actually like in the lab.
Yeah, a lot of research on nutrition, and he posted a screenshot. LeBron James's trainer said that after a game, he doesn't want LeBron to have something heavy like whey protein, so he gives him something lighter like vegan pea protein because his body's like a sponge, and he wants to send him right into recovery mode as soon as the game finishes. And they were just kind of like putting this guy on blast. It's like, Lakers have hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, on their payroll, and they can't find some guy to take care of their star athlete.
Well, I think the pro athlete argument is one of my biggest pet peeves. All right. First of all, what the pro athlete is doing at the current moment may or may not be what got them there. Second of all, we are talking about the biggest genetic freaks out of the whole population. I think people largely underplay the role of genetics in people's sporting success. I think with a lot of people in the professional leagues, they could have done anything and gotten there because they're just freaks. And you see this all the time. You hear stories about guys who grew up like homeless, not eating, and they weren't in the proper place for recovery. Their training was just on a dirt field somewhere. They didn't even have a ball to play with, and they still came out on top. Like, that is by no means ideal, but these people have drive and they have good genetics and they never give up and they put in the consistency and the effort. And that just goes to show things don't have to be perfect. A large part of this is genetics, and you can ride your genetics out for a long time, but not everyone is blessed with pro athlete genetics, unfortunately.
Yeah, not everybody's 6'8", 260 with an 8-foot wingspan playing basketball.
I forget the exact statistics, but if you're over 7, if you're your percentage of being in the NBA is like 0.05. It's like the hardest sport to get a starting spot in because there's only 5 positions, right? But if you're over 7 feet tall, that percentage chance of getting into the NBA skyrockets. It's like 40% or something crazy like that. You can't teach 7 feet tall. Sorry.
Exactly. And that's a really good point that a lot of these professional athletes, they could have done whatever the hell they wanted. They could have Zumba their way into the MLB. It really doesn't matter because they're just so phenomenally talented and gifted.
Yeah. Baseball is another good example. I saw some research that showed that there's not a single MLB baseball player that has even 20/20 vision. They all have better than 20/20 vision. It's a prerequisite to get into the MLB that you have better than 20/20 vision. They were talking about how people have single digit, 5 to 5 vision. They can see, 100 times better than your average person. And being able to hit a baseball, you need to be able to see the thing.
Bill Burr has a funny skit on that where he's talking about, back in the 70s, everybody being on cocaine was as much of a performance enhancing drug because they can see every stitch on the ball. Yeah, absolutely. It's there are traits that are being screened for that increase your performance in whatever the activity is, whether it's your physical stature in a sport like basketball or, if you're a lineman, or vision in a sport like baseball or golf, where you need to have such perfect depth perception to be able to pick out where that ball is or the green that you're putting on looks like. It's crazy. You can't just be standing on the tee box is that the fairway over there? I think I'll aim at that one. It doesn't work that way.
And another thing is professional athletes have unlimited time and unlimited money. If your only job was to work out, go for it. Try all these random things that may or may not work because you have unlimited time and unlimited resources. Sure, you can drop a bunch of money on some technique that has no evidence behind it because it doesn't matter to you if it works or not. Even if you get a little placebo effect out of it, it's valuable to you because you have your whole life to dedicate to training and playing sport. But unfortunately, that's not everybody. Everybody else has very, 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 very limited time and limited resources. And we want to be choosing things that are going to have the best value for their time. LeBron James is a perfect example. He posted his schedule during the playoffs a couple years ago, and his whole day was booked with just training and different, air quotes, recovery modalities, because that's what he has the time to. If he can get any teensy wincy bit of advantage, that's going to be good for him. But he doesn't have to deal with all the negatives of, wasting his time or wasting his money, because in his world, both of those things are pretty unlimited.
Right. And I think just to highlight the importance of this, or I guess the hierarchy of what we're spending our time on, if LeBron James only had 90 minutes a day to increase his performance on the court, he's not going to be going for massages and spend time foam rolling and whatever else.
Going to be kneeling on a Bosu ball throwing shit. I think he's famous for that.
Yeah, he's going to be squatting, deadlifting, and he's going to be taking 3-pointers. Or I don't know, he doesn't really take too many threes, I guess. But
maybe he should be taking more threes
in
practice. But we see this every year, or every 4 years, I guess, with the Olympics, right? Is they come out, they're wearing K-tape and have cupping bruises all over them, and everybody's like, damn, Michael Phelps got those cupping bruises all over him. That shit must work. No, it doesn't mean it works. It means that Michael Phelps has a bunch of extra money and time, and he can get cupped and doesn't care if it helps or not, because if it gives him even a 0.000001% increase in performance, he's, that means something to him, especially, at the highest level where the difference between winning and losing can be a fraction of a second.
Right. And not only that, but just because somebody's a professional athlete doesn't make them automatically super intelligent or knowledgeable in the realm of strength training. And two, there's a good chance that there's a lot of really intelligent individuals who are taking care of these people. So, unfortunately, I kind of just poo-pooed that guy who's LeBron James' trainer because he's offering him pea protein to help him recover, which is total bullshit. But if Michael Phelps wants cupping and the guy giving it to him knows it's probably not doing shit, but it makes the guy feel good, and Michael Phelps believes in it, then it's absolutely he's going to do it for him.
Well, I think a lot of times when you see professional athletes doing something different or something weird or new, people really focus on that because it's something different, but they kind of gloss over all the basic stuff that they're doing right on an everyday basis for, their whole life. Right. So nobody looks at their weight room sessions or their skill sessions on the court because those aren't sexy. People want to see the novel, new, quick fix, like we talked about earlier. People are looking for those quick fixes. So that's what they're kind of looking at.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more comfortable to tell yourself that you're not where you want to be because you don't have access to the amount of funds to have all this recovery stuff, again in air quotes, done to you, or that you're not up on the latest and greatest because you're not a celebrity with millions of dollars to blow every month, when in reality it's a lot harder to swallow the fact that you're probably just not working as hard as you need to be or as consistently as you need to be.
Yeah, and running with that LeBron James analogy, what people are looking at, those weird things he's doing, but what they're not looking at is how he has a consistent sleep schedule, probably goes to bed and wakes up at the same time, gets enough sleep every night, how he has very little stress in his life outside of basketball, right? He has groomed a life where all he has to care about is basketball, and any other stress, he probably has someone else to deal with. He probably has a nutritionist that is cooking every meal for him and making sure that he eats every meal. And he has a host of professional staff managing his fatigue. So people are monitoring every little aspect of him and managing that fatigue. And that is the heart of recovery that people gloss over.
Yeah, not as fun to talk about, not as novel, but 10 times as relevant. So, we laid the base of the pyramid with consistency, got into effort. If we're good on consistency and effort, then we have to take a look into recovery. And I think this is where a lot of people hit another wall. So we mentioned that first wall where, people start doing something and it's drastically different than doing nothing. So they see progress for their first 60 to 90 days. But then I think there are, in my experience, there are a group of people who are pretty good with consistency and pretty good with effort, but they're never willing to invest the effort into their recovery. So they're still going out and drinking several nights a week. They're not sleeping, maybe 4 or 5 hours a night, really inconsistent. And their nutrition's kind of all over the place. They might show up for a session and be like, oh, I haven't eaten in 18 hours. And the next time they show up and they just ate a ton of stuff and they feel like crap and they can't push themselves hard. So I think once you start to, I think you can make it to, like, I don't want to call it like a checkpoint, but if you have been going longer than a couple months and you're starting to feel stalled, I think that taking a look at your recovery is probably a good step to take.
Yeah. And the recovery stuff's it's not easy. Getting to the gym 3 to 5 times a week for an hour or two is much easier than controlling the other 23 hours of your day. It's much more time that you spend outside of the gym than inside of the gym. And the things you do outside of the gym are going to very, very much so influence what you can do inside of the gym. So if you're not managing that other 23 hours, you're leaving a lot to be desired.
Yeah, it's almost like we can rename this recovery part of the pyramid, lifestyle, right? It's really just what does your lifestyle allow you to achieve? And some people's priorities aren't 100% aligned with what their goals are. They might say that their priorities are one thing, but their actions kind of tell you another story. So I think just taking an honest look at what your goals are and what you do versus what you think you should be doing, you might find a disconnect there.
And even outside of recovery, like you said, these are lifestyle habits and they're going to enforce good health. Even outside of the gym, sleeping enough is something you should be doing regardless of whether or not you're working out, because sleeping 7 to 9 hours a night is one of the number one things you can do for your health. And there's a host of negative benefits of being sleep deprived. And there's a host of research showing that there's like 0.01% of the population that can survive off of less than 7 hours of sleep. But from our intakes, we would probably think that number was probably more towards 75%, because everybody comes in and they're like, I only sleep 5 or 6 hours, but I'm fine. That's all I need. Like, no, you're just lying to yourself and you don't know what it feels like to be adequately rested. And when you're living in a state of constant fatigue and tiredness, you kind of just get used to it and it becomes your normal, but that doesn't mean it's a good normal to have.
Everybody thinks they're part of that.
Yeah.
Fraction of a percentage.
It's like a gene mutation that very rarely happens. Like, it's not you.
Yeah.
When you take the amount of people and round it to the nearest number that can survive on less than 7 hours of sleep, it's zero.
Get your sleep, folks.
That's not just sleep. That's consistent sleep. That's going to bed at a consistent time, waking up at a consistent time. We'll definitely do another podcast on just sleep, because that's a deep rabbit hole we could go down.
Yeah, and we'll get somebody who's pretty qualified to give us some notes on it.
We have some sleep scientists around.
It's a fair-minded sleep scientist. Every time I join the recording software that we use, for those of you listening who that went right over your head, every time we join the recording software that we use, I always forget to put my name in, and so it just automatically generates one. And it's, at this point, it's just funny. And today my name is Fair-Minded Scientist according to this software. So
the first appropriate one. It's usually something about being a writer or something.
Struggling writer.
Yeah.
So beyond recovery, right now, if we create an ideal scenario, somebody is consistent with 4 or 5 days a week in the gym, whatever they want, they are showing up, putting the work in. Recovery or their lifestyle is structured to a point where they are sleeping, they are eating as much calories as they need to, and eating really nutritious foods. They aren't overly stressed. We're kind of at the top of the pyramid now, where we can talk about how your programming might make a difference in the progress that you're making.
Yeah. So, and then in terms of recovery, one last point is, when you're training hard, you're more likely to be adherent to all these recovery and lifestyle factors, because Monday morning, or even I guess Sunday is a better example. Sunday morning, you have a really hard workout scheduled, and Saturday night, you want to go out and drink. And usually that's what you do on Saturday nights, but you start to invest more in working out, and hey, I've got a really hard workout Sunday morning, and if I go out and drink tonight, I'm going to feel like shit in the morning and not be able to perform. And that drives your adherence to the recovery thing. So when you're working hard and you're consistent, you're more likely to adhere to all those recovery things, the sleep, the stress management, the nutrition, and managing fatigue, because you're more invested in what you're doing. So training hard and, making progress increases that buy-in and excitement around training. So all of these things we talked about kind of stack on each other. And if you're not doing the bottom, it's harder to get to the next level.
Small time to plug the Resilient Training Lab app, now in the Apple App Store, where you can focus on lifestyle factors and habits.
Yep.
Be sure to check that out.
Programs put together with lessons and daily check-ins and help keep you adherent to your lifestyle factors. More info coming soon.
All right. So we talked about consistency. Let's say somebody's super consistent in the gym. They show up, they put the effort in. They are taking care of their recovery and their lifestyle needs to suit them being able to push themselves and drive the adaptations that we've been talking about. So now we're at a point where we can probably talk about programming.
Yeah. At the end of the day, if you want to make consistent progress over a long period of time, you need to be on a structured and thought out program. Haphazardly throwing together workouts can work for a time, but eventually that progress is going to wane off because there's no long-term plan. And we talk about with our clients the idea of working out versus training. Anyone can come in and work out 2 to 3 times a week. But when you switch that mindset to training, to your whole life and having a long-term plan and having kind of each kind of workout build on the next workout, and each week build to the next week, and each week build to the next month, and looking at that big picture and setting objective goals and working towards those goals in an objective and measurable manner is where you take the next step when you go from working out to training.
Yeah, I think the comparisons that we use frequently to finance they're just really applicable. And, if you're investing your money into certain areas, you don't just swap it out somewhere else, month by month. You consistently pick things that you believe in to invest in, or things that have a track record of performing well. And over time, it grows to something monumental. And training is the same way. You don't just get to jump all over the place with your training. You have to either decide yourself or have a coach, explain to you what they think you should invest your time in when they understand your goals. And you won't get to something monumental if you're just all over the place.
Yeah, I think if anyone went to a financial advisor and they picked like 5 random stocks out of a hat and said, "Hey, this is what we're investing in," you would run away. But for some reason, when coaches do that, people get all excited, like, "Oh, novelty, variety." Like, no,
dude, I've literally seen trainers pull exercises out of a cup. They really,
I like for real, crazy. Like actually, like roll a dice. Oh, this is how many reps you're going to do. Pick up a card. This is how many. You got a 10. You're going to do 10 reps.
Yeah, 10 of diamonds. It's 10 stuff now.
Like, no, you need organization. You need those goals and objective measures, and you need to get your program working you towards those goals in the long term. And just randomly doing workouts is not that.
Yeah, I think people have I don't want to be unfair, but like, I guess a really simplified view of like why we might be doing exercises. Like at the end of the day, we're just like, yeah, we're working out, but there can be very hyper specific changes to your program that are relevant to you. And if you're struggling with an exercise or some sort of task, there can be modifications made in a way that not only allows you to work hard in the short term, but gets you back to whatever you're not able to do in the long term.
Yeah. And that's that Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Where people think they know a lot about a topic, but then they don't really realize how much complexity and depth there is to that topic. And if you think about all the things that you're an expert in, or maybe the 1 or 2 things you're an expert in, and how much you know about that topic, and how much you kind of think like, hey man, nobody else really knows about this topic. That's how you are in everything else in your life. Like I know a lot about training, but anything outside of training, I don't know anything about. Like,
we're pretty useless once we leave the gym.
Yeah, like there's so much depth and complexity to everything in life. And people get this idea that if they learn this base amount of knowledge that they know everything. But then once they start diving deeper into that topic, they realize that they actually know nothing. And unfortunately, a lot of us stop at that, oh, I know everything phase and never get deeper into it unless you're forced to because it's your profession or you take it up as a hobby. And I think it's important to realize that about yourself. The Dunning-Kruger effect, it's a human like characteristic. Everyone does it. It's unavoidable. Even if you know about it, you still do it. And being able to recognize that anything that you're not an expert in, there's a lot to be learned there, and there's a lot more complexity and depth to it than meets the eye.
Yeah, just in case there's somebody who doesn't know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is, it's when you aren't aware of how much you don't know, so you think you're an expert in something.
Yeah. And it, as your timeline goes on, it shows, at first you know nothing about a topic. As you start to learn about a topic, you think you know everything. And then as you learn more about that topic, you realize you don't know anything. And then as you become an expert on that topic, you start to climb up and, start to know some stuff, but you never get as high as that original hump, that original, I think I know everything hump. Even when you're the grandmaster expert in the topic, you never think you know as much as that person that just got introduced to the topic because there's so many unknowns.
The number of people I see who think they know a ton about training because leg day is squats, lunges, and then leg extensions blows my mind. It's like, it can be so much more complex than that.
Yeah, our human bodies are extremely complex, and, we're still learning every day about them. So if anyone says they've got it figured out, just don't listen to them because they don't. I mean, we do this for a living and we don't have it figured out by any means. Like, every day we learn something new. Every day a new research article comes out that may change the way we think. And being able to have that open mind and be your fair-minded scientist is something that is important to all aspects of life.
I am goals. Yeah, I mean, yesterday I had a conversation with a guy who he had two herniated discs in the past, and this kind of references a couple episodes on back pain that we had with Eric Lagoy. So check those out if you haven't listened to him. But through talking to this guy, I just kind of asked him, what was the narrative from the doctor when you were told you had this? Was this something that you were told was, just there for life now? And he said, yeah. So I asked him when this was. It was like early 2000s. So this guy's been living for almost 20 years, believing that he has two herniated discs because at one point he did, and whether the information wasn't available to this doctor back then or if they were just unaware of it. But, we know that disc herniations heal over time, usually like 3 to 6 months. And this man has been living in, I don't want to say like a false reality because like for him, it was very real, but he lived believing things that based on evidence, we know to likely not be true. And so this field is just so young, the field of strength and conditioning and physical therapy and really anything to do with exercise and rehab. It's so new that every 5 to 10 years, we're probably in, we think we're playing a completely different game compared to if we look that far in the past.
Yeah, I always say if you are a trainer and you can look back at the programs you writ 5 to 10 years ago and not be embarrassed, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, it's a huge part of growing.
I think one last kind of idea to talk about before we wrap this up is when you're training and you're making a program, you want to assess the person in front of you and find their weak points or find what they need the most work in and find that low-hanging fruit and attack that and get better at the things you're not good at because you have the most room for improvement there. And I think oftentimes people start working out and they kind of gravitate towards the things they're good at and they want to do more and more of the things they're good at. But you have much more room for progress when you find the things that you're not good at and start to work on those. And at first that might be super frustrating, but once you finally conquer something that you weren't really good at and become good at it, there's no better feeling. And again, that's what's going to be driving consistency and progress over the long term, is finding those hard things, finding that uncomfortableness, getting comfortable there, and doing it for a long time.
Yeah, and I think it's really easy to conceptualize the attack the low-hanging fruit when it comes to exercise. It's like, oh, I'm not good at split squats, so I got to do more split squats. But that can be true whether it's your effort in your training or even just your consistency in your training. And so it can be valuable in the beginning to find a way of exercising that you enjoy, that allows you to be consistent. You know, you can't build consistency out of nothing. And so like you have to try and find some way to hold yourself accountable when it comes to that, whether it's using a coach or just finding a way of training that you like. And over time, recognize that you need to build that into something that's going to be more efficient and more hyper specific to your goals.
Yep. It's always, you want to start out, finding something that you love, and you can continue to do that thing that you love for the rest of your life, but you still have to progress from there and start to kind of, like we've been kind of talking about a little bit this whole podcast, is make that transformation from working out for the sake of working out to training and getting attached to your goals and your progress.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. It's a pretty good place to wrap it up.
We got a pretty nice pyramid.
Everybody loves pyramids. It's like the strength and conditioning thing to do nowadays.
I wonder what it was before pyramids. I can't think of it right now. But yeah, you see trends right now. It's pyramids. So we'll probably get one out on social media at some point soon.
Yeah.
All right.
I think mindset might be at the bottom of this pyramid too.
Yeah. That can be a really important one. If somebody has a somewhat flawed or negative view of exercise, that would definitely hold them back.
I guess that's a conversation for another day.
So much content, man. There's content creators over here. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. So hopefully you may have encountered some reasons why you might not be making progress, and hopefully we offered some solutions to the potential problems you're experiencing, and you can get back to driving adaptation. Remember, muscles rented.
Put in that work.
All right. So as always, if you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review. I don't think we have a good ratio of listens to views. So
I know we broke the 1,000 view mark, and I don't know how many reviews we have, but not many. So get to reviewing, people.
All right.
Maybe we'll put some incentives out.
Thanks again, everybody. I'm Ryan at Resilient Training Lab. Paul at Resilient Training Lab, and you can find us on Instagram at Resilient Training Lab. And as always, we got some cool stuff on our website, www.resilienttraininglab.com. So if you haven't checked that out yet, be sure to check that out. There's some really cool testimonials on there, some fun blog posts, among other things.
Awesome. Have a good day. Talk to you guys soon.